The sun was shining brightly over the wide lake, and the gentle ripples of water caught the light like silver coins. The day was calm, filled with the smell of pine trees and the sound of birds singing. Tom stood on the porch of his small wooden cabin, looking out with pride at the view in front of him. He had saved for years to buy this land, and every time he came here he felt a deep sense of peace. The lake stretched across the valley, and though many people lived around the area, this particular spot was his. The water that touched his dock, the ground beneath the tall trees, and the slope that led down to the shore, all of it was private property. On this warm weekend, Tom had invited his closest friends Anna, Ben, and Mia. They had known each other since school, and whenever they got together, the air filled with laughter. Anna was the calm one, who liked sitting quietly with a book or watching the water sparkle. Ben was full of jokes, always making light of things, and Mia was curious, asking questions and noticing every small detail around her. The friends arrived around noon, carrying baskets of food and coolers filled with drinks. They placed everything on the picnic table Tom had built himself last summer. It was sturdy and smooth, sanded down so no one would ever get a splinter. They set out sandwiches, fresh fruit, and homemade cookies that Mia had baked. "Tom, this place never stops amazing me," Anna said, her eyes scanning the calm water. "It feels like we're far away from everything." "That's the best part," Tom replied, smiling. "No traffic, no noise, no stress. Just us and the lake." Ben threw his arm around Tom's shoulder. "And best of all, no one to tell us what to do." He laughed. Tom chuckled, though he knew that wasn't entirely true. The neighborhood's homeowners association, led by a woman named Karen, often liked to remind people of her so-called rules. She was strict about lawns, fences, even the color of mailboxes. But Tom's cabin was not inside the HOA's jurisdiction. He owned this patch of land outright, free from her control. After eating, they carried their fishing rods down to the dock. The water was clear, showing flashes of small fish swimming below. The dock creaked gently under their steps as they spread out, casting their lines into the lake. "This is the life," Ben said, leaning back with his hat tipped over his eyes. Mia dangled her feet in the water, laughing when the fish nibbled at her toes. Anna stayed quiet, absorbed in the view, while Tom focused on his line, patient as always. For a while, everything was perfect. The breeze carried the soft smell of water and earth, and time seemed to slow down, but the calm did not last. From the gravel path behind the trees came the sound of quick, determined footsteps. The crunching grew louder until a woman appeared. She wore a wide sun hat, large sunglasses, and an expression that looked as if she had been chewing on lemons. Her name was Karen, and she was the head of the homeowners association. "Excuse me," she called sharply, marching closer. Her voice carried across the water, breaking the peaceful mood. The friends turned their heads, startled. Anna whispered, "Who is that?" Tom's smile faded. "That's Karen, and by the look on her face, she's not here for a friendly chat." Karen stopped at the edge of the dock, folding her arms across her chest. Her posture was stiff, her chin tilted upward. "You cannot have guests using this lake," she said, her words crisp and loud. "HOA rules clearly forbid it." The group looked at each other in confusion. Ben raised his eyebrows. "Is she serious?" he muttered. Tom set down his fishing rod and stood. He didn't want to cause a scene, but he also wouldn't let her push his friends around. "Karen, I think there's some misunderstanding," he said evenly. "This part of the lake is on my land. I guess they're not breaking any rules." Karen narrowed her eyes behind her sunglasses. No, the lake belongs to the community. It is for residents only, and even then, guests are limited. You need to tell them to leave at once." Anna's cheeks turned red with embarrassment. "We didn't mean to cause trouble," she said softly, but Tom shook his head. "You're not causing any trouble," he reassured her. Then he faced Karen again. "With all respect, Karen, you don't have authority here. This shoreline, this dock, and this water up to a certain point all fall within my private property line. My friends are welcome here whenever I invite them." Karen's lips tightened and she shifted her weight as if she had not expected resistance. "That's not what I was told," she snapped. "The rules are very clear and everyone has to follow them. If we let you break them, then everyone else will want exceptions too." Ben leaned back on the dock and whispered to Mia, "She sounds like she runs the world." Mia stifled a giggle but quickly fell silent when Karen glanced at them. Tom crossed his arms calmly. He wasn't angry, but his patience was running thin. He had worked hard for this land, and no one had the right to order him around on his own property. Still, he chose his words carefully, keeping his voice steady. Karen, you might enforce rules in the neighborhood, but my cabin and this land are not under HOA control, he said. When I bought this property, I made sure of it. I've got the papers to prove it. For the first time, Karen's confidence faltered. A flicker of doubt crossed her face, though she quickly tried to cover it. Well, she said, clearing her throat, I will need to see those papers. Until then, your guests need to leave. Tom's friends watched in silence. The tension was thick, and the only sound came from the gentle splash of water against the dock. Anna held her breath. Ben clenched his jaw, and Mia gripped the edge of the dock nervously. Tom, however, stood tall and unshaken. He had expected this day to come. Karen had always hinted at her control over the lake, but she had never dared to confront him directly until now. He knew that once he revealed the truth, she would have no ground to stand on. With a calm smile, he looked Karen in the eye. This is my private land, he said firmly. My friends are staying right here. Karen froze. The sharp reply seemed to stop her in her tracks. She blinked behind her sunglasses, her lips parting as if she wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. For the first time in her life, perhaps, she had been caught without an answer. The silence that followed was heavy. The friends exchanged glances, unsure whether to laugh, speak, or wait. The birds kept singing, the water kept moving, but on the dock, time itself seemed to pause. Karen's mouth opened, then closed. Her face flushed pink beneath the shadow of her hat. She shifted her stance, trying to regain the authority that had just slipped through her fingers. Tom said nothing more. He simply waited, calm and steady, knowing he had spoken the truth. Karen stood stiffly on the dock, her arms still crossed as though the weight of her folded posture might give her strength. The silence around her stretched longer than she liked. Tom did not move. Anna, Ben, and Mia stayed quiet, their eyes shifting between the two. The water lapped softly against the wood and a bird called from the trees, but the tension was so thick it drowned out everything else. Karen cleared her throat, trying to regain her usual sharpness. It does not matter what you say. Rules are rules. You may think this land belongs to you, but the Homeowners Association was formed to protect the community. You are part of this community and you need to respect that. Tom's expression stayed calm. He had dealt with her kind before, people who spoke louder when they felt their ground slipping. I respect my neighbors, he said evenly. But respect is not the same as obedience. I'm not under your association, Karen. You don't have the power to control this land. His steady voice made her blink again, and she quickly glanced at his friends as though expecting them to look guilty or ashamed. Instead, they stood by him. Anna's gentle face showed quiet support. Ben's smirk hinted at amusement, and Mia's wide eyes glimmered with curiosity rather than fear. Karen's lips pressed tighter. She had expected Tom to back down immediately. She had imagined his guests packing their bags, embarrassed, leaving her with another small victory to brag about during the next association meeting. Instead, she had met resistance, calm, firm, and undeniable. She tried another angle. Think about the example you are setting, she said, her tone shifting from harsh to falsely patient. Other residents see you breaking rules and they will start to think they can do the same. What happens when everyone brings strangers onto the lake? This place will lose its order, its safety, its peace. Tom almost laughed at the irony. He thought about the morning, the peaceful laughter of his friends, the quiet rippling of the lake. Then he looked at her, standing stiff and stern, her words slicing the air like knives. The only threat to peace right now was her. Karen, he said gently, do you hear the water? Do you hear the birds? Do you see my friends fishing quietly and enjoying the day? This is peace. There is no danger here. There is no rule broken because you don't have the right to make rules here. Karen's face turned red. Don't talk down to me, she snapped. I have lived here for 10 years. I have kept this neighborhood clean, safe, and beautiful. Everyone knows who I am. Everyone respects me. Ben whispered under his breath, just loud enough for Mia to hear. Or fears her. Mia covered her mouth to hide a laugh, but her shoulders shook. Karen's head snapped toward them. Is something funny? She demanded. Mia froze, but Tom stepped forward quickly, blocking Karen's sharp gaze from reaching his friend. Enough, he said firmly. You came here thinking you had control. You don't. If you want proof, I'll happily bring out my property documents. They show my boundary lines clearly, and they include this dock, this shore, and the section of lake water that touches it. Karen tilted her head. She hated being challenged, but curiosity flickered in her eyes. For years, she had told people the entire lake was managed by the association. She had said it with confidence, and no one had dared to argue. Now Tom was saying something different. Documents? She asked slowly, narrowing her eyes. Yes, Tom replied. The ones from when I bought the property. The land office signed them. The county stamped them. It is all official. Would you like me to show you? Karen hesitated. If she said no, she would look weak. If she said yes, she risked being proven wrong in front of witnesses. Her jaw tightened. Bring them, she ordered. Tom nodded once as though she had just given herself homework. He walked calmly toward his cabin, his steps steady and confident. His friends followed behind him, leaving Karen on the dock fuming silently. Inside the cabin, the air smelled of cedar wood and fresh bread from the loaf Mia had baked earlier. Tom went straight to the drawer in his desk. He pulled out a thick folder filled with documents. Anna, Ben, and Mia gathered around, watching curiously as he flipped through the papers. Do you really have everything ready? Mia asked softly. Of course, Tom replied. When I bought this place, the real estate agent explained the whole boundary. I wanted no confusion. I knew the HOA would try something eventually. Ben chuckled. You're smarter than me. I would have tossed the papers in a box and forgotten about them. Anna smiled. That's why Tom owns land and we just visit. Tom found the page he wanted. It showed a map of the property lines stamped and signed with official seals. He closed the folder and turned back toward the door. Let's give Karen the lesson she's asking for, he said quietly. When they returned to the dock, Karen was pacing, her arms flailing slightly as if rehearsing an argument in her head. She stopped when she saw the folder in Tom's hands. Well, she demanded, trying to sound confident again. Tom laid the folder on the picnic table, opening it carefully. He pointed at the map. Here is my cabin, he said. Here is the boundary line. Here is the dock, the shoreline, and the section of lake water. It is all included. This is my private land. Your association has no say here. Karen leaned over the paper, her eyes darting quickly across the map. She wasn't used to reading official documents, and the stamps and signatures made her nervous. She wanted to argue, but the proof was clear. Still, she tried one last trick. This could be fake, she said. Tom looked her straight in the eye. Do you want to call the county office right now? He asked calmly. I'll put the phone on speaker so everyone can hear. Karen's face turned crimson. She opened her mouth and closed it. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, her fingers tightening on the edge of the table. The strength she carried in her voice earlier was gone. Ben crossed his arms, watching with a smirk. Looks pretty official to me, he said casually. Mia added softly, and very clear. Anna, always kind, simply said, It seems settled. Karen's jaw clenched. For once in her life, she had no words sharp enough to win. She felt the weight of their eyes on her, not with admiration but with pity and quiet defiance. Her authority had cracked, and there was no way to mend it in this moment. Finally, she straightened, brushing invisible dust off her shirt. This is not over, she muttered, her voice low and shaky. Tom calmly closed the folder. It is over, Karen. You tried to take control and you were wrong. My land, my friends, my rules. That's the end of it. Karen turned sharply, her heels clicking against the dock as she stormed back up the gravel path. Her figure disappeared into the trees, leaving behind only the echo of her footsteps. Silence fell once more, broken only by the gentle sound of water. The friends exchanged looks of relief. Ben was the first to laugh, shaking his head. I cannot believe how red her face got. She looked like a kettle about to whistle. Mia giggled, covering her mouth. She was so sure she was right. And then silence. Anna smiled softly. I almost felt sorry for her, almost. Tom placed the folder back under his arm. This was bound to happen someday. But now she knows the truth and she won't forget it. The friends settled back onto the dock. They picked up their fishing rods, their sandwiches, and their laughter where they had left off. The sun was beginning to lower, turning the sky golden. The lake reflected the colors, glowing like fire and glass. For Tom, the moment carried more than peace. It carried victory, not loud, not boastful, but firm and certain. His land was his, and no one could take that away. But as the last bird crossed the orange sky, Tom could not help wondering if Karen truly would give up so easily. The next morning began with soft mist rising from the lake. The water looked like glass, still and untouched, reflecting the pale colors of dawn. Tom woke early, as he always did when he stayed at the cabin. He stepped out onto the porch with a cup of hot tea in his hand, breathing in the cool air. The pine trees stood tall, their branches heavy with dew, and the sound of a distant woodpecker echoed through the valley. For Tom, mornings like this were priceless. They reminded him why he had bought this place. The lake was not only a piece of land but a sanctuary. It was where his mind could rest, where stress melted away, and where his friends could gather without the weight of city life. He sipped his tea and thought about the scene from yesterday. Karen's face turning red, her words stumbling, her sudden silence when he showed her the documents. He knew she had been embarrassed, but he also knew she was not the kind of person who accepted defeat easily. Yesterday she lost. But she'll be back, Tom muttered to himself. The door creaked open behind him and Ben stepped out, yawning. His hair was messy and he wore the same old shirt he had worn the day before. "Morning, Captain Calm," Ben said, rubbing his eyes. "Already up and thinking about Karen?" Tom smiled faintly. "You know her. She doesn't let things go." Ben stretched and leaned against the porch railing. "Yeah, but you showed her the truth. She can't argue with legal papers." "She'll try," Tom said. "People like her don't need facts. They need control." Inside, Anna was already setting the table for breakfast. She liked to keep things orderly, even in a cabin. Mia helped her, humming softly as she laid out plates and cups. The smell of toast and eggs filled the room, drifting out onto the porch. By the time they sat down together, the sun was higher in the sky. The mist over the lake had lifted, leaving the water bright and clear. The group ate happily, talking about fishing, swimming, and maybe hiking later. But beneath the cheerful words, the thought of Karen lingered in each of their minds. Meanwhile, not far from the lake, Karen sat at her polished kitchen table, staring at her phone. Her jaw was tight, her fingers tapping against the surface in frustration. The embarrassment from yesterday had burned all night in her mind. She had replayed the moment over and over. Tom's calm words, his friend's quiet support, the humiliating silence that had followed her defeat. "This isn't finished," she said aloud. Though no one else was in the room, Karen prided herself on being the one who kept order. In her view, the association was not just a group of neighbors, but a shield against chaos. She believed she was protecting the community, though many thought she simply enjoyed power. To her, Tom had broken the system. He had challenged her authority and made her look weak. She reached for a notebook, flipping it open to a fresh page. In neat, sharp handwriting, she began to list her next moves. Contact other board members. Check the original community maps. Speak to the county office if needed. Apply pressure by speaking to nearby residents. Karen tapped the pen against her teeth. She knew Tom had shown official documents, but she wondered if there was a loophole, a mistake, or some way the association could still claim authority. She picked up the phone and dialed a number. "Linda, it's Karen," she said firmly when her friend on the board answered. "We have a problem. That man with the cabin thinks he's above the rules. We need to take action." Back at the cabin, the day grew warm. The friends carried a canoe down to the water, laughing as they tried to balance it. Tom steadied it at the edge of the dock while Mia climbed in carefully, her arms waving for balance. Anna followed, more graceful, and Ben nearly tipped the whole boat when he stepped in too quickly. Tom pushed them off and watched as the canoe drifted onto the lake, their laughter echoing across the water. For a while, it felt like Karen's shadow had lifted. The lake sparkled, the trees swayed, and the air was filled with the joy of friendship. Tom sat on the dock with his fishing rod, content just to watch. But the peace did not last long. Around noon, Tom heard the distant hum of an engine. He looked up and saw a black SUV pulling up on the gravel path near the cabin. The vehicle was spotless, shining in the sun, and Tom immediately knew who it belonged to. "Here we go again," he muttered. The SUV door opened, and Karen stepped out, dressed neatly in a blazer even though the day was warm. Beside her came another woman holding a folder. Tom recognized her as Linda, one of the association's board members. The two women walked toward him with determined steps. "Tom," Karen called out, her voice sharp but controlled this time. "We need to talk." Tom set down his fishing rod and stood, meeting them halfway down the path. "Good afternoon," he said politely, though his eyes narrowed slightly. "What brings you here?" Karen didn't waste time. "This is Linda, from the board. We've reviewed some documents and we believe your claim about the lake may not be as solid as you think." Linda opened the folder, pulling out a map. She laid it flat on the picnic table, It looked older. The ink faded in places. According to this record, she said softly, the lake was intended for shared community use. That means it may not be entirely private. Tom studied the map. It was vague, drawn decades ago with no clear boundary lines. He recognized the tactic immediately. Karen was hoping to use confusion and doubt to regain power. This is outdated, Tom said calmly. I have the most recent documents signed and sealed by the county. You saw them yesterday. Karen crossed her arms. Outdated or not, this shows the original intention of the developers. That intention matters. Tom raised an eyebrow. Does it matter more than legal ownership? Linda shifted uncomfortably. She wasn't as aggressive as Karen. We just want clarity, she said carefully. We don't want conflict. Karen shot her a look as if reminding her to stay firm. Then she turned back to Tom. If you refuse to cooperate, we may need to involve lawyers. At that moment, the canoe returned, sliding up to the dock. Ben, Mia, and Anna stepped out carrying paddles and looking surprised to see Karen again. Oh no, Ben muttered under his breath. Round two, Mia frowned. Why can't she leave us alone? Anna stayed silent, her calm eyes watching carefully. Tom turned slightly, his voice strong but even. My documents are clear. This land and the section of lake beside it are mine. If you want to involve lawyers, that is your choice. But I will not be bullied on my own property. Karen's face tightened again. She hated the word bullied because it described exactly what she did, and hearing it aloud made her burn inside. We'll see what the lawyers say, she snapped. She gathered the folder from Linda and stormed back toward the SUV. Linda gave Tom an apologetic look before hurrying after her. The vehicle drove off, leaving a cloud of dust behind. The friends gathered around Tom. She's really not giving up, Anna said quietly. Ben laughed bitterly. She's like a dog with a bone. Even when it's not hers, she won't let go. Mia asked, do you think she'll actually get lawyers involved? Tom exhaled slowly. Maybe. Or maybe she'll just try to scare us. Either way, I'm not backing down. I bought this land fair and square. If she wants a fight, she'll lose. The group fell silent for a moment, each of them staring out at the lake. The water looked as calm as ever, but they all knew storms could be brewing beneath the surface. Tom tightened his grip on the folder of documents. He felt steady, but he also knew that the days ahead would test him. Karen was not finished. She was planning her return, and the next round would be even harder. The following week was not quiet. Tom had returned to his normal work days in town, but his mind often drifted back to the lake. His cabin was meant to be a retreat, a place where he could rest, but ever since Karen's second visit, he carried a sense of unease. He knew she would not give up. He knew that she was plotting, gathering people, whispering her side of the story to neighbors who had never even questioned the ownership of the lake. One evening, Tom received a letter in the mail. It was printed neatly on paper with the association's logo at the top. The message was short, but firm. Dear resident, the board of the Homeowners Association requests your presence at a special meeting to discuss the use of the community lake. Attendance is expected. Failure to attend may result in further action. Sincerely, the board. Tom read the letter twice. His jaw tightened, but then a small smile appeared on his face. They were trying to pressure him again. They still refused to accept what he had shown them. But instead of avoiding the confrontation, Tom made a decision. I'll go, he said aloud to himself. I'll go and I'll tell them all the truth in front of everyone. The following Saturday, Tom drove back to the cabin with Anna, Ben, and Mia. They planned to spend the weekend there, but they also prepared for the meeting, which was to be held at the community hall not far from the lake. The hall was already full when they arrived. Long rows of chairs had been set out and nearly every seat was taken. Neighbors whispered among themselves, curious about what was about to unfold. At the front stood Karen, as polished as ever, holding a stack of papers. Beside her sat Linda and two other board members, their expressions serious. When Tom entered, the room grew quieter. Some heads turned toward him. A few people nodded politely, others frowned, and some looked uncertain. His friends followed close behind, standing by him as they took their seats near the front. Karen began the meeting with her usual commanding tone. Thank you all for coming. Today we face a matter that concerns the well-being and unity of our community. As many of you know, this lake has always been considered shared property, available for residents but managed under the rules of our association. Recently, however, there has been confusion, Her eyes flicked toward Tom briefly before she continued. Certain individuals claim parts of the lake as private property, allowing guests and activities that go against our guidelines. This sets a dangerous precedent. If one person ignores the rules, what stops others from doing the same? A murmur ran through the crowd. Some nodded in agreement, others looked doubtful. Karen raised her hand to silence them. "We have brought old records and maps," she said, lifting a paper. "They show that the developers intended for the lake to be shared. It is our responsibility to honor that intention." Before she could continue, Tom stood. His voice was calm but carried across the room. "May I speak?" Karen hesitated. She had hoped to present her argument fully before he had the chance to respond. But with so many eyes on them, she could not refuse. "You may," she said coolly. Tom stepped to the front, placing a folder on the table. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of his neighbors one by one. "My name is Tom. Many of you know I own the cabin on the East Shore. I purchased it 3 years ago. When I did, I made sure to review the property boundaries with the county. This folder contains the official documents, signed and sealed by the county office, showing clearly that my land includes the dock, the shoreline, and the water that touches it. I am not under the association's authority." He opened the folder, holding up the stamped map for everyone to see. "This is not an opinion. This is not about old intentions. This is legal ownership." The room grew silent. People leaned forward, squinting at the map. Whispers began again, softer this time, uncertain. Karen quickly stepped forward, her voice sharp. "This man wants to divide us. He wants to take what belongs to everyone and keep it for himself. Is that fair? Is that neighborly?" Tom shook his head. "I have never stopped anyone from enjoying the lake. My friends are welcome as my guests, just as your friends are welcome when you invite them to your homes. The difference is that my land is mine and I will not be ordered off it." One older man in the audience stood. His name was George, and he had lived near the lake longer than anyone. His voice was rough but strong. "I remember when that cabin was first built. It was always separate. The HOA never had power there. I think Tom's right. It's his land." A ripple spread through the room. More people began to nod, whispering agreement. Karen's face grew tight. She glanced at the board members, but even Linda looked uncertain. Karen tried one last tactic. "Even if the land is his, shouldn't he respect the spirit of the community? Shouldn't he follow the same rules as everyone else?" Tom lifted his chin. "Respect goes both ways. I never stopped neighbors from fishing near my dock. I never blocked the path. But respect does not mean letting someone control you unfairly. I respect you all, but I will not obey rules that do not apply to me." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Anna, who had been quiet, stood and faced the crowd. "I have visited Tom's cabin many times. It is peaceful there. He welcomes us with kindness. What Karen is describing is not about community. It is about control." Her calm words seemed to strike deeper than Tom's firmness. Several neighbors nodded openly now. Ben added with a grin. "And honestly, if you want to sit by the nicest view on the lake, you should be glad Tom's the one who owns it. He keeps it better than any of us could." Mia's soft voice followed. "He doesn't break peace. He brings it." The hall filled with murmurs again, but this time the tone had shifted. People were leaning toward Tom, away from Karen. The balance of the room had changed. Karen's cheeks flushed. She lifted her papers, waving them in the air. "Old records matter," she insisted. "We cannot ignore them." But Linda finally spoke, her voice quiet yet clear. "Karen, old records do not override legal ownership." "You know that." Karen turned, stunned. Linda avoided her eyes, focusing instead on the folder in front of Tom. "If the county recognizes this land as his, then it is his. We may not like it, but we cannot change it." The board members beside Linda nodded reluctantly. The crowd followed, their voices rising in agreement. George clapped his hands together once, as though sealing the matter. Karen's face burned red, but her voice faltered. "You are all making a mistake," she hissed. "You'll regret this." She gathered her papers and stormed out of the hall, her heels echoing sharply on the floor. The door slammed behind her. Silence followed for a moment. Then George spoke again. "I say we leave Tom alone. He's not hurting anyone." The crowd murmured in agreement. Linda gave Tom a small nod. "You have nothing to worry about," she said softly. Tom closed his folder and exhaled, feeling the tension in his shoulders ease. His friend stood beside him, smiling with pride. He had faced Karen in front of everyone, and this time, Her power had truly cracked. That evening, back at the cabin, the lake was calm again. The setting sun painted the water gold, and the friends sat together on the porch, eating dinner and laughing freely. But though the day had ended in victory, Tom knew deep down that Karen would not disappear so easily. She had lost twice now, once in private and once in public. That kind of humiliation would not sit quietly in her heart. "She's not done," Tom said softly, watching the lake. "She'll come back, and next time she'll be even more determined." His friends grew quiet, each of them understanding what he meant. The lake was peaceful, but beyond its calm surface, another storm was already brewing. The next few weeks passed with uneasy calm. Tom returned to his work in town and spent quiet evenings at the cabin with his friends. The lake looked as peaceful as ever, the surface shining under the sun, but he carried a steady awareness that Karen had not given up. He knew she was too stubborn, too proud to let the matter end the way it had at the meeting. Every time Tom walked by the dock, he felt a strange tension, as if the stillness was only temporary, as if the lake itself was waiting for the next move. Anna often noticed him staring at the water in thought. She would touch his arm gently and say, "Don't let her steal your peace." Tom would nod, but inside he was preparing for the day Karen would strike again, and then it came. One Saturday morning, Tom woke early. The sun had only begun to rise, painting the lake in shades of gold. He stepped outside with a cup of coffee, breathing in the cool air. But as he walked toward the dock, he stopped suddenly. 3 large signs had been hammered into the ground near the water. Each one read in bold letters, "Community Property, Managed by HOA, Private Claims Invalid." Tom's heart tightened. He knew instantly who had done it. Karen had been here, maybe even during the night. She had crossed onto his land, planted the signs, and left them there like a challenge. Tom pulled the signs out one by one, stacking them beside the porch. His jaw clenched, his patience running thin. This was no longer just about arguments or misunderstandings. This was trespassing. This was open defiance of the truth. Later that morning, Anna, Ben, and Mia arrived for the weekend. Tom showed them the signs. Ben shook his head in disbelief. "She's bold, I'll give her that. But this is going too far," Anna frowned. "She won't stop until she feels like she's won. You need to end this once and for all." Mia spoke quietly, but her words carried weight. "If you let her keep pushing, she will think you are weak. She will keep doing more." Tom nodded. "Then it's time to finish this." The gathering stormed that afternoon. Karen returned, but not alone. She came with several neighbors, some from the board and some who had always followed her lead. They walked down the dirt path toward the cabin as if they owned it, their voices loud and commanding. Tom was waiting at the porch. His friend stood beside him, calm but firm. Karen stopped in front of the dock, her arms crossed. "You removed the signs," she said sharply. "They were on my land," Tom replied evenly. "They had no right to be there." "This land," Karen announced loudly so everyone could hear, "is part of the community. No matter what papers you wave around, it does not change that fact. We are here today to reclaim what belongs to all of us." A few of the neighbors nodded, but most shifted uncomfortably. Some of them had been at the meeting when Tom showed his documents. They knew the truth, but Karen's voice carried such force that they hesitated to oppose her directly. Tom stepped forward, holding the folder once again. He opened it slowly, showing the stamped map. "You have all seen this. The county recognizes this land as mine. That means your association has no authority here. Coming onto my property without permission is trespassing." Karen's eyes narrowed. "You think you can scare us with paperwork? You think you can stand against the entire community?" Ben laughed softly. "Community. This feels more like a parade you forced people into." A murmur of uneasy laughter ran through the crowd. Karen's face reddened. She pointed at Tom. "If you don't agree to share this lake under our rules, we will take legal action. We will bring lawyers, and we will drag this through court until you regret ever fighting us." Tom's voice was steady. "You tried this before, Karen, and every time the truth remains the same. You don't have the power here. You only want control." A neighbor's voice. Before Karen could respond, George, the older man who had spoken at the meeting, stepped forward. He raised his hand, his weathered face calm but strong. "Enough," he said firmly. "I've lived here longer than anyone. I've seen owners come and go, and I tell you all now, that cabin has always been separate. The HOA never owned that land. Tom is right, and you know it. Several neighbors nodded. This time their voices rose in support. George is right, one woman said. We can't keep fighting something that isn't ours. Another man added, I don't agree with Tom about everything, but fair is fair. The land is his. Karen spun around, glaring at them. You're all blind. He's tricking you. He'll use this land for himself and leave the rest of us with nothing. Anna finally stepped forward. Her voice was calm but sharp, like the edge of glass. No, Karen, you are the one trying to take what doesn't belong to you. Tom never closed the lake to anyone. He never pushed people away, but you've tried to control everyone even when it wasn't your place. The group grew quieter. Karen's authority was slipping. Her shoulders stiffened as she realized her influence was fading in front of the very people she had tried to lead. The breaking point, Tom walked closer, standing a few steps from Karen. His eyes were steady, his words firm. This ends now. I will not let you harass me again. If you or anyone else steps on my property without permission, I will call the sheriff. If you post signs on my land again, I will report it. You can keep arguing if you want, but the law is on my side and I will not bend to you. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came. For the first time, she looked uncertain. The silence of the neighbors pressed against her. They were no longer whispering support. They were watching, waiting, and many of them were leaning toward Tom. Ben crossed his arms. You've lost, Karen. Maybe not in your heart, but out here in the open, you've lost. Karen's face turned pale. She glanced at Linda, hoping for support, but Linda only looked down at the ground. The board members who once stood beside her no longer spoke. Finally, Karen's voice cracked. This isn't over, she whispered. But the strength was gone from her tone. She turned sharply and began to walk away, her followers trailing after her. Some went quickly, others lingered with uneasy expressions before leaving. Soon, only Tom, his friends George, and a few supportive neighbors remained. Peace returns. The air grew lighter as the group thinned. George placed a hand on Tom's shoulder. You stood strong. That was the only way. Don't worry about her anymore. The rest of us see the truth. Tom gave a small nod. He was tired, but relief washed through him. The battle had taken weeks of tension, but now the weight lifted. That evening, as the sun sank low, Tom and his friends sat on the porch once again. The lake glowed in shades of orange and pink. Birds skimmed the water, and the gentle sound of ripples filled the air. Anna leaned back with a sigh. It feels different now, like the lake is finally ours to enjoy in peace. Ben grinned. I'd call it Tom's victory lake. Mia smiled softly. It is not just victory. It is balance. The truth has found its place. Tom looked out across the water. For the first time since Karen had appeared at his door, he felt truly calm. He knew she might never forgive her defeat, but he also knew she had lost her grip on the community. The neighbors had seen through her. They had chosen fairness over control. The lake stretched before him, quiet and steady, reflecting the fading light. It was more than land or water. It was freedom, hard-won and finally secure. Tom took a deep breath and whispered to himself, This is my land, my peace, my home. And for the first time in many weeks, he believed it fully.